Hello students, welcome back to my class. And in my previous session, we discussed different kinds of literatures like Indo-Anglian literature, different terms like Indo-Anglian literature, which is used to denote original literary creation in the English language by Indians. The second one was Anglo-Indian literature, which this term defines to denote the writing of Englishmen in English about India and Indian life. And the third was Indo-English literature, which is used to denote translations into English from literature in Indian languages. And there is still another category of translations, which is also known as Transcreation. Why? Because these are the translations into English made by an author of his own works in his mother tongue. And I gave you the example of Rabindranath Tagore that he translated Gitanjali, and he also got the Nobel Prize for it. And today I'll give you a brief literary background of Indo-Anglian literature, especially about the novels. So there were various problems which was faced by the Indians writing in English. Though these problems, though these are very brief problems, and we say that the demand for English, for the English studies, it is generally supposed that the study of English was imposed upon Indians by Lord Macaulay, with the sole purpose of serving the ends of the British administration in India. And he wanted to make India a cultural colony of England to produce an army of English-knowing clerks. But it is not actually true. Such views are prejudiced and narrow-minded, erroneous, and contrary to the well-established facts. In the early days of the British rule, the British had no such ulterior motives in introducing English as are generally imputed to them. In 1823, a committee of public instruction was appointed by the government to consider the question of the improvement in the education imparted to the natives, that is, the Indians, and it allotted all the funds available for the education of Sanskrit College in Calcutta. They gave all the funds to Sanskrit College. But the reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, reformers होते हैं समाज सुधारक, like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, they protested vehemently against it, and the petitions were filed demanding imparting of the best and the most modern European education through English. So Sanskrit and Persian, which were the chief subjects of study, were felt to be entirely inadequate, and Raja Ram Mohan Roy himself founded a number of schools to teach Bengali youth through the medium of English. That is, our own Indians, they actually supported the introduction of English medium in studies. So by the time of Macaulay, the demand for the introduction of English as the medium of instruction and for the modernization of education was widespread. कि जब तक मैकॉले ने ये अपना वो निकाली मिनट्स ऑफ मैकॉले, एंड व्हेन मैकॉले imposed or implemented the recommendations in March 1835, the ground has already been set up by the Indians themselves for the introduction of English. So what they wanted was, what they felt, these social reformers, they felt that the study of English and Western science on the whole proved very fruitful. It will prove very fruitful. And it did prove fruitful, and it developed a scientific and rational approach to life, and educated Indians could shake off much of their conservatism and narrowness of outlook. So, finally in March, as I told you that in March 1835, it was decided that the funds for education will be used for English education alone, with the object of promoting Western science and literature among the natives. So, contact with the English language and literature was fruitful to the regional languages, as it led to the growth and development of creative literature in their tongues. Now, there was even the creative writing began in English. Indians began to use English for creative expression much before Macaulay's Minutes and the implementation of his policy on English education. For example, if we see Henry Derosio's volume of poems was published in 1823, and Kashi Prasad Ghosh published his volume of poetry entitled The Shire and the Other Poems in 1830. And these two eminent Indians may not be great as poets. Their work is largely imitative of such English poets as Scott and Byron, but their historical importance is great, for they belong to that small group of Indians who wrote in English much before Macaulay. So we always blame Macaulay for the introduction of English, but he is not to be blamed. So we'll just go through the brief history of early novelists. The novel, the short story, and the drama were practically non-existent in Indian languages before the middle of the century. With the introduction of English in India, there was a spurt of translations, and a number of English classics were soon translated into the various Indian languages. It was inspired by these translations. And English classics were the models for the Indians writing in English, and their works were molded closely on these matters. Bankim Chand Chatterjee became the first Indian writer of a novel in English. If you see, he was the first Indian writer of a novel writer. He made his mark with a novel named Raj Mohan's Wife, which was published in 1864. 1001 Nights by S.K. Ghosh, and Indian detective stories by S.B. Banerjee. Like if you see the writing of novels or even writing of creative work in English, it began from Bengal. So these are the works of prose fiction in English from the Indian hands. And if we mentioned that you have also studied in your first year about Toru Dutt, mention may also be made of Toru Dutt's novels called Bianca and the Young Spanish Maiden, which was published after her death by her father in the columns of the Bengal magazine. Ramesh Chandra Dutt wrote many novels in Bengali, and two of them were translated into English by the novelist himself. That is, if the writer himself translates those novels, they are known as Transcreations. And these are The Slave Girl of Agra and The Lake of Palms. So, if you see the growth of Indo-Anglian writing, it had 4 phases. So, I'm just giving you the introduction, the background history of how Indian language and the creative writing in English came into being and what were the stages. So, these were the stages. There were 4 phases of it. Such were the pioneers in the field of English writing in English, Indian writing in English, and their work is largely imitative of the British models. The first, imitative means नकल करना, imitation करना उनका, कि जैसे इंग्लिश में लिखा हुआ था, इंग्लिश नॉवलिस्ट ने लिखा है, वैसा ही उनकी नकल करते हुए खुद ने लिखा. We may call this early phase from 1830 to 1880, the phase of imitation. Though even these early writers show considerable mastery over the English language and versification. They sowed the seeds which was to grow, flourish and bear fruit in the years to come. That उन लोगों ने, when they started writing as imitation, उन्होंने बीज बो दिया था इस अच्छी नॉवल का लिखने का. The second stage is the stage of Indianization. Indianization, it may be said to begin with the works of Toru Dutt in the last quarter of the 19th century. The third phase may be said to begin with the opening of the new century in the phase of increasing Indianization, when the Indians writing in English acquire a national consciousness, yani Rashtrawadita, when they started thinking about nation and its consciousness. There was awakening in the writers. And right to interpret the mind and heart of India to the West. Now they started writing about India so that the Westerners can read about India and come to know what India is. Fourthly, the fourth stage is experimentation and individual talent mark the works of the writers in post-independent India. Post-independent India, when India became independent. After 1947, Indian writers have acquired confidence and strike out along new lines of their own. And this growth and maturity of Indo-Anglian writing is clearly brought out if we briefly trace the history of Indo-Anglian poetry, novel and drama from 1880 down to the present day. Now, if we see in Indo-Anglian poetry, we have Michael Madhusudan Dutt. He was a Bengali writer, and Shoshi Chandra Dutt and Toru Dutt. And Toru Dutt. You have read poems about Toru Dutt in your first year, so I needn't go through the poems. I will focus more on the novel. The English prose for social and political purpose was written by the Indians from earliest times with rare force, eloquence and effectiveness. Excellence in the writing of creative prose could be achieved much later than in the writing of verse. So, पहले जो इंग्लिश में लिखना शुरू हुआ था वो सोशल और पॉलिटिकल पर्पस के लिए लिखना शुरू हुआ था, and then later it began in creative writing. So, but you have that there was, despite its late start, the novel has gone far ahead of poetry, both in the quantity and quality. कि जितना कविताएं लिखी जाती हैं या पढ़ी जाती हैं, उनसे ज़्यादा novels लिखी और पढ़ी जाती हैं. Though novels became late, but they have become a very popular genre of literature, and it is written and read very frequently. It was only the Gandhian struggle for freedom that the Indo-Anglian novel really came to its own. The ideals of Indian struggle for freedom are reflected in many novels. If we read the novels of K.S. Venkat Ramani's Murugan, the Tiller in 1927, and Kandan the Patriot in 1932, and with the publication of Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable in 1935 and Kuli in 1936, and Raja Rao's Kantapura, which was written in 1938, the novel in English may be said to come of age, that is, it matured. And today the Indian novelists writing in English are large in number. Besides Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao and R.K. Narayan, the three foremost Indian writers of fiction in English, there are K. Nagarajan, Bhamani Bhattacharya, Manohar Malgonkar, Khushwant Singh, Balchandra Rajan, Kamla Markandeya, Anita Desai. These are of the older generation, and there are many, many new ones. But just because we are looking at the history of Indian novel in English, so we will go step by step. So all these novelists may and many more have considerably enriched Indo-Anglian fiction. But this Indo-Anglian fiction, it also has its peculiar problems. Okay, when you're writing in a foreign language, so it is difficult to express every emotion and every custom and every idea in a foreign language. One of the most difficult problems which had to be faced was the problem of language. The Indian writer in English must evolve a language flexible and varied enough to suit different fictitious characters drawn from the vast and varied professions and strata of society, as well as the Indian enough to create the impression of truth and authenticity. Like when you want to describe, suppose, an Indian wedding, and then especially the Indian bride. So Indian bride normally has, especially the North Indian bride, they normally have ghungat. And if you want to translate ghungat in English, there's no such word as ghungat in English. If you say veil, curtain, this does not actually define the exact ghungat. So there is a marked difficulty that it doesn't suit the culture, social culture and the customs. So Mulkraj Anand tried to solve the problem by medium of Indianization of English words, by literal translation into English of Indian expressions and proverbs. जैसे कोई कहावतें हैं, मुहावरे हैं, he translated literally into this. But actually, when you translate it literally, the spirit doesn't go. Like if you say, दाल में कुछ काला है. If you say something is black in dal, so of course, if we are an Indian and reading an English novel, we can understand that dal mein kuch kala hai, there is something black in dal. But if a foreigner, or an English person is reading that novel, he will not be able to understand it, because that proverb or this thing is not in their original language. These expressions, they will not be able to understand. And just because this literal translation in English was there, so the result was not always a very happy one. But Raja Rao has more successfully solved this problem. Raja Rao's Kantapura, as I mentioned earlier. He does not write Babu English, but successfully transmutes into English the idiom, the rhythm, and the tone of the natural speech of his characters. He thus achieves an Indian idiom with distinct echo of regional speech without, however, lapsing into vulgarism, which mark the works of Mulkraj Anand. So, the Indian writers, what they thought is that English, the language should evolve in an Indian English before you can write novels in English. Okay, Indianization hona chahiye. Like if you see now, there is not one particular English. Now there are Englishes, like African English, Canadian English, Indian English. So what happens, because this English has become like Indianized. When we read that, the Indian idiom and the Indian words, they have gone into the English and they have created Indian English. So what do you think? Another peculiar problem that faces the Indian novelist in English is that of creating an Indian consciousness. कि Indian consciousness कैसे होए, awakening कैसे होए. Novels in English are likely to command a market not only in India but all over English speaking world, that is all over the world, is global. Hence he must project an image of India and her culture which is authentic and national rather than distorted, narrow and regional. So we must overcome his regional loyalties. Now what happens, that there is another problem, that you have to show the real India to the world. So creating the Indian consciousness was also you can say a difficulty for the Indian writers. Now if you go, what were the themes of Indian novels? Now today the themes of Indo-Anglian novels are many and varied, which are the portrayal of poverty, hunger and disease, portrayal of widespread social evils and tensions, examinations of the survival of the past, exploration of hybrid culture of dislocation and conflicts in a tradition-ridden society under the impact of the beginning of industrialization, like when India was becoming modern. So there was some of these themes. And now some other themes in the novel of English are interracial relations, Indian national movement and the struggle for freedom, like we have it in Raja Rao's Kantapura, partition of India and the death, destruction and sufferings which are caused by it, which is portrayed in Khushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan. Depiction of hunger and poverty of the Indians is mentioned in Bhavani Bhattacharya's So Many Hungers. That Indian rural life, it was depicted in Muruganda Tiller, which was written by Venkatramani. The conflict between tradition and modernity is mentioned, or it is the subject matter of Mulkraj Anand's Untouchable. It continued to engage the attention of the novelist. These are the themes which continue to attain the attention of the novelist. The theme of confrontation of the East and West has been successfully dealt with by Raja Rao, Bal Chandra Rajan, Kamla Markandeya, and many others. These are the earlier novelists. The themes of loneliness, rootlessness, and exploration of the psyche and the inner man have been dealt with Anita Desai. So Anita Desai here, she does not worry more about this freedom movement and all that. She have the themes of loneliness and rootlessness. That is, she has the themes which are internal, which are personal, which are individual. They have been individualized. And then in her latest novels, Cry of the Peacock, Voices in the City, and by Arun Joshi in The Foreigner. So these themes have been taken up. So, in short, we can say that Indo-Anglian literature continues to grow and flourish, and this despite all the misguided and prejudiced and politically motivated campaign against English as a foreign language. This language, which comes in the way of its growth, now more and more Indians are writing in English than ever before, and the Indo-Anglian writer is enjoying a much wider market, and it has indeed a bright future. That is why most of the writers, they wish to write in English because it has a wider range of readers. Like, it is a global, English has become a global language. So if the writer writes in English, he has the whole world for as his reader. The readership is wide for English writers. That is why they wish to write in English. So I have given you a brief introduction of the Indian novel in English, and in the next I will introduce you to R.K. Narayan. So till then, goodbye. Thank you for listening.